The little girl stood frozen beside the sleek black limousine, gripping the strap of her faded backpack until her knuckles turned pale. She had only paused outside the towering office building to escape the rain, but the conversation she accidentally heard made her heart pound. Two security guards near the entrance were chatting casually in fluent Mandarin, convinced that no one nearby could understand them. Their voices stayed low, yet every word struck the girl's ears with startling clarity. One of them glanced toward the luxury vehicle waiting for the company's billionaire owner and remarked that once he stepped inside, everything would unfold exactly as arranged. The second guard nodded in agreement, adding that the brakes had been replaced that morning and that no one would suspect a thing, and by the time anyone realized the truth, it would be far too late. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Her grandmother had raised her after they moved from Shanghai years ago, and although she spoke English perfectly, Chinese had always been the intimate language of their home. She understood every syllable of that chilling exchange. Her eyes darted toward the building's revolving doors, where Daniel Harrison, one of the youngest self-made business magnates in America, was emerging, surrounded by assistants and executives. Cameras flashed, employees smiled, and investors shook his hand, completely unaware that death was waiting just beside the curb. The girl knew she had only moments to act. Ignoring the terrified voice screaming inside her head, she sprinted through the crowd and shouted for him not to get into that car. Security officers intercepted her immediately. Daniel barely glanced in her direction, but she kept pleading, explaining that the guards had been speaking Chinese and that someone had tampered with his brakes in an attempt to kill him. The entire entrance fell into a stunned hush. One guard's face drained of all color while the other forced out an awkward laugh, claiming she was simply making things up. Yet Daniel noticed something odd. Neither guard asked what exactly she had heard. Instead, they exchanged a look of unmistakable panic. Slowly, Daniel turned to his chief of security and ordered a full inspection of the vehicle. Within moments, technicians were examining the limousine as the crowd waited in absolute silence. Then a mechanic suddenly stepped back and warned everyone not to touch the car, his voice echoing across the entrance, because the brake line had been deliberately severed. Gasps erupted from every direction. Daniel stared at the vehicle that would have become his coffin in mere minutes. Police officers, already stationed nearby for a scheduled public event, immediately surrounded the scene. The two guards tried to flee, but hardly made it 10 steps before officers tackled them to the ground. As handcuffs clicked into place, one of the guards glared at the girl with pure hatred and started to say that if she hadn't understood Chinese, but he never finished his sentence. Daniel looked down at the trembling child, rain dripping from her hair and her worn shoes, her backpack stitched together multiple times, and she appeared more frightened than anyone else present. He walked over slowly and knelt so that his eyes met hers. He told her she had saved his life. She lowered her gaze and replied that she simply could not let him die. He asked for her name, and she said Emily. When he asked about her parents, she hesitated before answering that they had passed away 3 years earlier. Daniel's expression softened, and he asked who took care of her now. She explained that her grandmother cleaned offices during the night while Emily stayed in the school library until it was time to go home together. The rain had delayed everything that day, placing her outside that building at precisely the right moment. Daniel looked up at his towering headquarters, where hundreds of people worked and millions of dollars changed hands every hour, yet none of his expensive security systems had protected him. A little girl with nothing but courage had accomplished what money could not. As flashing police lights reflected off the wet pavement, investigators began questioning everyone at the scene. Early evidence revealed that the assassination plot had been orchestrated by competitors, hoping Daniel's sudden death would derail a critical merger worth billions. The two guards had accepted enormous bribes, believing their secret conversation was perfectly safe because they assumed no one nearby understood Mandarin. They had never imagined that the quiet child waiting in the rain would comprehend every single word. Hours later, after giving her statement, Emily prepared to leave with her grandmother, who had rushed to the scene in tears upon hearing the news. Daniel stopped them and said he owed his life to her granddaughter. Her grandmother smiled gently and insisted that Emily had only done what anyone should do. Daniel shook his head and replied that many people hear danger and stay silent out of fear, but she had spoken up even though she risked everything. He reached into his jacket, then paused, feeling that money suddenly seemed like the smallest possible thank you. Instead, he handed Emily his personal business card and told her to call him if she ever needed anything. Weeks passed, and Emily forgot about the card until one evening when her grandmother collapsed from exhaustion while working a night shift. Doctors discovered a serious heart condition that required immediate surgery they could not afford. With trembling hands, Emily searched her backpack and found Daniel's card. She almost hesitated to call, thinking that someone as important as a billionaire would never remember a little girl. But he answered personally and said he had been waiting for her call. Within hours, the finest specialists were examining her grandmother, and the surgery was fully covered. Her recovery went well. Daniel did not stop there. He established a scholarship in Emily's parents' names, ensuring she could attend the best schools without worrying about tuition. He also arranged a comfortable apartment close to her grandmother's workplace, so they would never again struggle to pay rent. When reporters later asked Daniel why he had invested so much in one child, he smiled and responded that people often think wealth changes lives, and sometimes it does, but courage changes destiny. He looked toward Emily, seated in the front row during the scholarship ceremony, and said that she had every reason to stay quiet, with nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet she had chosen to save a stranger simply because it was the right thing to do. Emily smiled shyly, still carrying the same repaired backpack and speaking softly, but everyone in the room now understood that true heroes rarely wear expensive suits or stand behind microphones. Sometimes they are just children standing in the rain, brave enough to speak one sentence that forever alters another person's future. The months that followed transformed both Emily's life and Daniel's in ways neither could have imagined. Although the police had arrested the two corrupt guards, the investigation uncovered a far larger criminal network. The men had not acted alone. They had been hired by an international business syndicate that had lost millions after Daniel refused to participate in illegal financial deals. The failed assassination had embarrassed the organization, and investigators feared they might try again. Daniel's security team doubled every precaution, but he found himself thinking less about his own safety and more about the brave girl who had changed his fate with a single warning. Emily, meanwhile, struggled to adjust to her new life. Daniel had arranged for her grandmother's surgery, paid every hospital bill, and enrolled Emily in one of the city's finest private schools. Yet despite the beautiful classrooms and new opportunities, she felt like an outsider. Many students came from wealthy families, and some whispered that she only attended because a billionaire had taken pity on her. Emily ignored the comments and focused on her studies, recalling her grandmother's advice never to let someone else's opinion determine her future. Daniel visited them often, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. He discovered that Emily had an extraordinary gift for languages. Besides English and Chinese, she had begun teaching herself Spanish from library books. She loved solving puzzles and reading about history, frequently asking Daniel thoughtful questions about business, leadership, and honesty. He admired her curiosity and determination, and in return, she reminded him that success meant little if it was not used to help others. One afternoon, Daniel invited Emily and her grandmother to the grand opening of a new children's education center funded by his foundation. Hundreds of guests attended, including government officials, journalists, and business leaders. During his speech, Daniel surprised everyone by inviting Emily onto the stage. The audience applauded as the shy girl walked forward. Daniel smiled warmly and spoke into the microphone, explaining that many people believe heroes are fearless, but they are wrong, because heroes are afraid yet choose to act anyway. He recounted how months earlier, this young girl had heard something terrible and could have stayed silent, but instead she risked herself to save someone she had never met, and because of her courage, he was standing there today. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Emily's cheeks turned red, and she whispered quietly that she had only done what her parents would have wanted. There was not a dry eye in the room. The story spread across television and social media, with millions watching the video of Daniel honoring the girl who had saved his life. Messages of support poured in from around the world, and schools invited Emily to speak about courage and integrity. She always ended her talks with the same simple message: you do not have to be powerful to make a difference, because sometimes all you need is the courage to tell the truth. Not everyone celebrated her growing recognition. Unknown to Emily, one remaining member of the criminal syndicate blamed her for destroying their plan. Determined to silence the only witness who had understood the guard's conversation, he began watching her from a distance. Investigators eventually intercepted suspicious communication suggesting another attack was being planned, not against Daniel this time, but against the girl who had exposed everything. The police acted immediately. One evening, officers arrived at Daniel's office with alarming news that they were targeting Emily. Daniel did not hesitate, ordering that she and her grandmother be taken somewhere safe starting that night. Within an hour, they were moved to a secure location under police protection. Emily was frightened, but Daniel reassured her, saying that she had protected him when no one else could, and now it was his turn to protect her. The investigation reached its climax 2 weeks later when authorities arrested the syndicate's leader as he attempted to flee the country. Documents recovered during the raid revealed the full assassination plot, along with evidence linking several corrupt executives to numerous crimes. Thanks to Emily's testimony and the evidence gathered afterward, the entire organization collapsed. When the trial concluded, the judge praised the courage of a young girl whose honesty had prevented a murder and exposed a criminal empire. Years later, Daniel often looked back on that rainy afternoon outside his office. Every important decision he made reminded him of the child who had proven that character is worth more than wealth. Emily eventually graduated at the top of her class with dreams of becoming an international lawyer, determined to help innocent people and fight corruption wherever she found it. Daniel proudly attended every graduation, every award ceremony, and every milestone, never calling himself her savior. Instead, whenever anyone thanked him for changing Emily's life, he always smiled and gave the same answer. He had not saved her because she had saved him first. Years passed, and the story of that rainy afternoon gradually became a legend inside Harrison Global. New employees often heard the tale of the little girl who had saved the company's founder, though few realized she was a real person. To most, it sounded like an inspiring corporate myth, but Daniel Harrison never allowed anyone to forget that it was true. Emily grew into an exceptional young woman, fluent in 5 languages and graduating at the top of her university class with a law degree specializing in international criminal justice. She rejected offers from prestigious law firms that promised enormous salaries and instead joined a task force dedicated to exposing corruption, human trafficking, and financial crime across international borders. Daniel could not have been prouder. He told her after her graduation ceremony that she had become exactly the kind of person the world needs. Emily smiled and replied that he had taught her that success means helping people, and she was simply following his example. One autumn morning, nearly 15 years after they first met, Daniel stood before the board of Harrison Global. At 60 years old, he announced that he would be stepping back from daily operations and creating a charitable foundation focused on education for underprivileged children. Then he made one final announcement, introducing the newest member of their board of directors. The conference room doors opened, and Emily walked in wearing a simple navy suit, carrying the same repaired backpack she had kept all those years, not because she still needed it, but to remind herself where she came from. The executives stood and applauded,